Hello, I'm Robin Worley, welcome to Lenscraft. Recently I've had an email from someone wanting to know about how to change the colour of an object in Photoshop. Today I'm going to demonstrate 3 easy ways you can do this. Each method has its advantages and drawbacks, so depending on your image you may want to try each or even a combination of the 3. The image I'll be using for this is this snowy postbox scene. The first tool we'll look at is the colour replacement brush. You can select this from the Tools palette in Photoshop, where it's grouped with the other brush tools. Before you use this tool, you should create a new layer to work on. This is a destructive edit, so it's always going to be best to work on a copy of the image. As my image only has the background layer, I'll duplicate it using Command and J on my keyboard. If your image has several layers, you may want to consolidate them all onto a new stamp layer by pressing Shift, Option, Command and E. Now if you're using a PC, that's Shift, Control, Alt and E. After selecting the tool, pick the new colour that you want to apply to the image. There are a few options you can use to configure the brush, which can also affect the quality of the results. As always with a brush-based tool, you can set the size and hardness of the brush, which may make it easier to work with. But the main adjustment controls that you want to set are to the right of these in the context-sensitive toolbar. First is the mode. This needs to be set to the colour blending mode because I want to use the brush to sample the colour of the postbox and replace it with a new colour. Then there are 3 sampling modes which determine how the brush will sample or identify the colour to be replaced. When I have the sampling set to continuous, the brush is continuously sampling the area I paint over. This is useful for covering a large area of colour, but it can spill over into other areas if the brush moves over something by accident. A good example of this is if I accidentally brush over the snow, it will change the colour in that area. If you find this is happening, you may want to use the Sample Once option for that area. Now when I first click with the brush, it takes an initial sample from that area. This sample is then retained until I release the mouse button. Now as I paint with the brush, it applies the new colour over any colour that matches my initial sample. I can even paint over the snow and it won't change the colour. Now the accuracy of the colour replacement is being controlled by the tolerance setting. The wider the tolerance, then the less precise the colour replacement will be. In other words, the brush will change a wider range of colours. Now that might be a good thing depending on the image you're working with. If you want to work with a greater precision though, you'll need to use a lower tolerance. That, however, could make it difficult to brush over areas and replace a lot of colour. Despite its limitations, the colour replacement brush can be surprisingly effective. Now the second method that you could use to change the colour of an object in Photoshop is the Replace Colour adjustment. This is also another destructive edit, so as with the colour replacement brush, you should create a new layer to work with. You can select the adjustment in the Image Adjustments menu where you'll find the Replace Colour option. This displays the Replace Colour dialog. The first thing to do is sample the colour that you want to replace using the eyedropper tools at the top. There are 3 of these eyedropper sampling tools that you can use to do this. The first on the left takes a sample each time you click with it. If for example I use it to sample the red of the postbox, but then sample the white of the snow, the second sample I've taken replaces the first. Notice that as I click to make the sample, it updates the preview. The preview is showing me the areas I've selected in white. These are the areas where the colour will be replaced. In this example, you can see that although I've selected the postbox, other areas of the image are also selected. That's because they include an element of red that's similar to the postbox. You can control the precision of this selection using the fuzziness slider. This will probably be easier to see if I first change the colour of the postbox using the hue slider. When the fuzziness slider is over to the left, the selection is very precise. As I move the fuzziness slider over to the right, the selection becomes broader and less accurate. Most of the time, you probably won't be able to create a good selection using a single sample. That's when you can use the Add to Sample eyedropper. By making an additional sample with this, you can improve the selection. If you find your adjustment still spills over into other areas, try restricting it using the fuzziness slider. Additionally, you can use the Subtract from Sample eyedropper to remove that colour. Once you're reasonably happy with your selection, apply the adjustment. If you then want to further restrict the selection, try using a mask. For example, I could select the outline of the postbox now using a rectangular marquee tool. If I then add a mask to this layer, it converts the selection we've made into a new layer mask. This ensures that only the postbox displays the adjustment we made. You can also use masks to tidy up other areas. For example, I might want to add back the red lettering on the notice. Now let's look at the third adjustment method. This is a two-step process and has the advantage of being non-destructive. Step 1 is to first create a new colour range selection using Select and Colour Range from the Photoshop menu. This displays the colour range dialog. Although you can select a colour range from the drop-down, we want to use the sample colour option. This allows us to use the sampling eyedroppers to pick the colour we want to replace. You should recognise the 3 eyedropper sampling tools from the previous method, and these work in just the same way. I'll start by sampling the postbox and then controlling the accuracy of the selection using the fuzziness slider. This also works in the same way as in the replace colour adjustment we looked at earlier. As I'm making my selection, you can see a grayscale image indicating the selection. If you don't want to use a grayscale selection, there are other options in this drop-down. You can also switch the thumbnail in the dialog between the image and the selection, which can be helpful. Once you've created your selection, click the OK button. You can now see the selected area outlined by the Photoshop marching ants. Now for the second step, where we want to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. When the new layer is added, it also converts the selection into a layer mask. If I hold down my Option key and click on the thumbnail, you can see the new layer mask. Now I can use the hue slider to change the postbox to a new colour. Although the colour range tool usually creates a good selection, you may find it spills over into other areas of your image. For example, the red writing on the notice is now green. If you find areas like this, you can paint over them on the layer mask with black and it hides them. I think this final method probably offers the most flexibility and is certainly my personal favourite. Despite this, you may still find times when the other tools work better depending on what you're trying to do and the image. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, please share it with others. I'm Robin Worley, you've been watching Lenscraft. I'll see you soon for another video.